Hello everyone, Hadley here with Hillcrest Tennis. Today we are going to be talking about how to create a fluid, powerful, and effective swing. This is very important for a lot of reasons, mainly because it's going to help you obviously create more power, and then you're also going to be able to get the ball deeper and your shot will be more effective. So it will also create opportunities for you to set up winners in the court. So first of all, what we're going to talk about is kind of the load to unload. And if you think about the analogy would be a coil. So if you're trying to compress a coil, you're going to push down and then you're going to kind of twist it. And then when you release it, it twists and then it unloads and rotates up. So the compression starts from pushing down and then it will compress up. So when you're thinking about setting up for a shot, you're wanting to make sure that you load. So your first motion would be to turn just like that coil. So you would turn and then you're going to compress. So you're going to compress starting down at your ankles. You're compressing, and then as you go to hit, then you're going to unload. So then you're going to rotate backwards. So what's going to happen is you're going to push up with your ankles, and then it will be your knee, your core, your shoulder, your wrist, and then your racket. So you're thinking about that sequence. Now, the key here is that we don't get ahead of ourselves and try to rush the sequence, because if that happens, then you're going to be off balance, and then you ruin the rhythm. So you're really wanting to think. So you have to load. So compress that coil with the turn, and then you're going to rotate. So then you're going to rotate and then uncoil and then spring up. And if you notice when they do the slow motion with the pros, their wrist kind of drags behind, and then that racket head is the last thing to come through. And that should be, if you visualize cracking a whip, the tip is the point that is moving the fastest. So same thing here. You're trying to create a whip action with the racket head acceleration coming through that ball. And just thinking that, really reiterating that the force is from bottom up. Okay, so really you're generating that force to create that whip and not rushing that rhythm, not rushing that sequence, because that sequence is extremely important. And if we get out of balance, if our racket tip comes through too fast now and our wrist is dragging behind, now we're using that racket, or we're using our wrist too much, and that goes into a whole nother conversation. So really remembering that sequence of that load to unload is extremely important. But again, remembering that racket tip is the fastest, should be accelerating at the point of contact. And one thing that we've been discussing with some of the members that have been coming out, we've been talking about relaxing your arm and relaxing your hand and wrist as you're swinging. Because if you think about it, if your hand and your arm is extremely stiff and tight, it's really hard for that racket to kind of create the shape and the racket head speed if your arm is super stiff. But the more relaxed you are, your racket can do the work a little bit more than your arm has to. And so really thinking about letting that hand relax and that arm, and in turn everything else will relax, so that So that load to unload, it's going to be easier for you to get that coil to unload a lot easier if your body is relaxed. And so another important concept that goes along with this in this conversation is when you're in your load position, one thing that you really need to make sure that you're keeping in mind is that your space between you and the ball is a good distance. So it would, if you think about it, your motion is as if you're throwing like a medicine ball. So you're wanting to, throw that ball over the net. It's that motion here. But you can only get that if your space between you and the ball is correct. If you're too close, now you're kind of just pushing the ball, away from you. But if you have that distance, now you really want to be moving away. So your body is moving into the ball, out and into the ball. So if you think about like taking a 5-gallon bucket of water and you're going to throw it. And so it's that motion out and really relaxed. So you're swinging out and up. This again goes back to a more relaxed arm will help that fluid swing and will help that natural motion push your body out and around that ball. It's also going to help your weight transfer. If you think about if you're too close to the ball, there's really no weight transfer. Again, going back to that whole, you're just using your arm and there's no momentum into the ball. But if you can get your body weight into it, and now you naturally have to go from back to forward with your weight transfer if you have the correct spacing. And then we can also discuss that open and closed stance. So, a lot of times people will hit, if you're standing on the baseline, people are standing so that they're square to the ball here. And that is open stance. But the thing to keep in mind is that, your turn, there's no turn with the hips if your toes are facing the net. So when the key point with the open stance is that toe is pointing out, and now you can get the turn and now you can pivot, right? And so now if you look at this, now it looks like the coil that we talked about, right? So it's coiling your body. And then as you hit, you should have the space, and now you're here and then you're out and open stance into the ball. And then your weight transfer is out and through the ball. And again, I think the visual is really helpful, thinking about throwing that gallon of water or that bucket of water will really help that natural swing that will come with that. Okay, and then we'll also discuss the closed stance. So the closed stance, so open stance is that toe must turn so that you can get that hip rotation and that coil. Typically you'll be hitting the open stance on wider balls. You have to go out for the ball, a little bit lower ball. So sometimes you have to get a little bit lower ball so your open stance. But typically you'll be hitting a closed stance when you have to move up to the ball. So if it's short, or if the ball is a little bit up the middle, you're going to be hitting more closed. But the closed stance, the key thing here is that you want to make sure that you're not stepping across your body. So you're not stepping here parallel with the line. because if you think about it, you have no hip rotation and nothing to get the ball. So if you're thinking about throwing that bucket of water, you can't get it very far. So really you want to be thinking like a 45-degree angle to a 90-degree angle. So then you're stepping here, but you still have the ability to rotate your body, and you can still have that spatial distance between you and the ball. And again, as you're swinging, to generate that fluid swing, you want your racket should be pushing away from your body and not too close in. Okay, so when in doubt, it's best to be further away from the ball than it is to be too close. Because if it's too far away, all you have to do is get that open stance and get your body weight into it. But if it's too close, there's no way to get any sort of rotation on that ball. And I think that that's our number one issue that we have with a lot of club players, just in general across the board, is we tend to allow that ball to get too close to our body. And so then it's very difficult to hit an effective, powerful shot. And so we get ourselves into trouble, especially if we're playing doubles. A lot of the time the ball will be floated to the net player, and then we're set up for failure already. So really trying to generate that space between you and the ball. I always like to say it's trying to define the relationship with that ball. You don't want it to be too far away. You don't want it to be too close, but there's a happy medium with that relationship. And it's a constant, it's an every shot situation. And that's the part about tennis that makes it difficult, is finding where the ball is going to land, and then making sure that you have enough space between you and the ball so that you can hit that effective, powerful ground stroke with a nice fluid swing and a nice relaxed arm. And going back to that open stance and closed stance, just making sure that you're practicing both so that you feel comfortable. But just really keeping in mind, if you're hitting that open stance, it's not toe squared to the net. It's that outside foot pointing out, and then you can rotate so that you can coil and then get that rotation. And then you'll hit more closed stance on those shorter balls. You really won't be hitting an open stance on those shorter balls unless you have already established a position at the net. Then you might be hitting that open stance, but typically you'll be hitting that closed stance, forehand or backhand. And so again, I hope this helps. Be on the lookout for our fall programs. They will be starting September 14th that week, and look for the events on the calendar. We are extremely excited for our fall program. Thank you to all those that helped make our summer program successful. Our USTA teams had a great showing this last 40 and over season, and we do have a Hillcrest team that will be competing for the 18 and over. So good luck to those ladies in their matches this coming month. And again, be on the lookout for those fall programs and fall offerings. And we will also be accepting our block schedule, spots for the block schedule. Our block starts October 5th and it goes through December 18th. So if you have any questions, feel free to call the tennis office, or you can email us at tennis@hillcrest.cc. And please reach out with any questions or concerns. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.